Hi there and welcome back. In today's video, we will discuss 7 steps of a redundancy plan to help all HR professionals carry out a successful exercise without the risk of being sued, and also help HR professionals tackle the difficult questions they often face when making redundancies. The topics we will cover are: what is redundancy, determine the roles at risk, group consultation, selection criteria, first meeting, second meeting, final meeting, and the right to appeal. Let's begin with what is redundancy. Redundancy is the process when employers have to let go of one or more employees due to circumstances that are unrelated to their current job performance. It is essential to consult with all those at risk and continue looking for alternatives to redundancy throughout the process. Before we get to the 7 steps, here are some reasons why an organization may consider making their staff redundant. 1 is economic recession. If external factors like an economic recession start to affect your company, it might be necessary to let some employees go. The COVID-19 pandemic led to a worldwide economic recession for many businesses and had a significant impact on the world. In order to stay afloat, companies had to start making cuts, which often meant letting employees go. Termination of business. Another reason for redundancy could be when a business owner decides to shut down the business. He will then need to make all the positions within the business redundant. Termination of job title. If your company no longer needs a certain job title, for example, if your company decides to function as an exclusively work-from-home operation and they decide to give up the office premises, then the job of the facilities manager may become redundant. Limited funding. If a business or specific project does not receive sufficient funding, then this may call for positions related to these projects to be made redundant. Relocation of business. You could potentially encounter redundancy if your business moves to a new or different location or even country. Your company may also need to downsize in order to get established in a new location. It's important to remember that prior to commencing a redundancy plan or exercise, we must leave no stone unturned to ensure that there is no other option possible. Some considerations of alternatives to redundancy could include carrying out a cost review, looking at benefits or bonuses that could be cut perhaps, considering reduced working hours or pay. This could also save costs if it is the primary issue. As you do your research here, you'll also be collecting valuable information which could be used to answer the questions of employees in the consultation stage. For example, during a redundancy discussion, an employee may raise the suggestion of considering reduced working hours or pay. In this situation, you can confidently answer them, saying that you have considered this option already, however, it turned out not to be a viable option at the moment. If you are not successful finding any alternatives to carry out redundancies, then you will need to follow the following steps to successfully carry out a redundancy plan. Step number 1. Determine the roles at risk. The pool of people at risk of redundancy is usually including all employees that undertake the same role or belong to the same department. If there are many people undertaking the same role within a certain area of your business, you will need to include all of them in this pool. For example, maybe you are deciding to lay off the learning and development staff, as currently you cannot afford maintaining an L&D initiative. This would mean that you would have to include all trainers regardless of their experience, skill level or performance within the pool who may be made redundant. Once the roles at risk have been determined, then the selection criteria for who from that pool will be made redundant can be drawn out at a later stage, which we will discuss further. Step number 2 is group consultation. Now that you have broadly identified who is likely to be affected, it's time to start consulting with them about the elimination of the role or possible changes to the role. A brainstorming meeting is typically what needs to happen before making any changes. This gives employees a chance to share their insights and potentially have a say in the proposed changes. It is important that you make it clear at this stage that these changes are only proposed at the moment and don't represent the final decision. As per the law, it is required that you start consulting with employees as soon as possible. Hence, it's best to get a pool of affected employees together informally and inform them of the concerns. You must inform them that this is the start of the redundancy consultation. Step number 3 is selection criteria. You will need to decide on the criteria you will use to measure staff against in order to identify those who should be dismissed for redundancy reasons. It's important that you have an easy to understand selection criteria so people can see how their individual ratings contribute to their overall score. It would be a good idea to bring a draft of the criteria you plan to use at the consultation meeting so that you can gain the input of the staff on the criteria chosen for the selection. Step number 4 is the first meeting. After the selection criteria meeting, the next step is to hold individual meetings with everyone in your selected pool and find out their initial reactions, comments on the selection criteria. Offer them the option to volunteer to leave on redundancy terms. Clearly explain to them in detail their redundancy benefits and entitlements. Employees who are being made redundant have the opportunity to challenge your plans. They also have the right to propose alternative options for you to consider. You'll need to reply to each of these ideas in an outcome email after the meeting. So make sure to make good notes of the options suggested by the employees. Your outcome email should respond to all points raised by the employee during the consultation. Invite them to the next meeting with an agenda and a selection of possible options for next steps. Step 5 is the second meeting. In this meeting, the employees must be given the opportunity to comment on their individual score in relation to the selection criteria. It is only natural that employees will like to know how their other colleagues have scored. However, we don't need to share this information with them as this would breach confidentiality. Give them another opportunity at this meeting to make any additional suggestions which haven't been considered yet. Once this meeting is over, again send them a follow-up email including any adjustments made to their scores. In this email, you must also invite them to the next and final meeting in which the outcome could be dismissal. If you don't have a pool or selection criteria, it's worth at least having a consultation meeting before going straight for the final consultation meeting. 2 meetings are recommended, however, this obviously depends on the situation of your organization. Step number 6 is the final meeting. In this meeting, the employee will be informed if their services are being dismissed on grounds of redundancy. You will need to recap everything and all suggestions discussed in the previous 2 meetings before you make a final decision. Allow the employee one final opportunity to propose any alternate suggestions and answer them with evidence that the suggestion has been considered, however, it is not feasible at this point. And finally, issue a notice of redundancy. Following up the meeting with an email and letter confirming that their position was selected for redundancy and detailing their leaving arrangements and redundancy terms. This letter must also include the employee's right to appeal this decision. If an employee is required to work their notice period, you must still consider alternatives during this time. For example, maybe an opportunity has arisen in another department for a similar role. This is a legal requirement and shows that you have done everything possible to avoid layoffs. Step 7. The right to appeal. To ensure that the dismissal process is fair, the employee needs to be able to challenge any decisions that are going to impact their future employment. It's always good to get someone else to hear the employee's appeal. So consider who will do this at the start of the process if an employee decides to make an appeal. You might have your manager carry out the redundancy procedure and a senior manager manage the appeal if necessary. And as an HR professional, those are the 7 steps of a redundancy plan you must follow to mitigate the risk of any litigation for your organization. And with that, we conclude this video. And if you found value in this video, like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. I post HR and leadership related videos every week. See you in the next video.